Amazing discovery, captured tiger eye tank revealed to travel only 120 miles. An incredible twist. Jack Thompson stumbled into a forgotten realm as he cleaned out his late grandfather's barn. A rusty tiger eye tank loomed in a patch of sunlit dust, ancient and imposing, its once fiery roar now reduced to echoes of a world long past. A shiver crept up his spine at this extraordinary find, but instead of excitement, a wave of betrayal washed over him. His grandfather had served in silence, leaving Jack with an unyielding pressure to uncover the stories they had buried alongside the tank. Could he, a mere high school history teacher, unravel the past while grappling with his own uncertain future? With funding cuts looming over his head, Jack felt like the weight of the community's expectations pressed heavier each day. The future of his teaching position felt as fragile as the tank's rusting hull. His love for history was overshadowed by the stark reality he faced. Voices whispered around him about schools closing, jobs disappearing, and livelihoods evaporating into thin air. Jack uneasily tugged on the sleeves of his cardigan, fingers fidgeting as the enormity of the situation set in. Would he soon be an unemployed educator, a statistic in the cycle of societal neglect? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Every moment spent with the tank ignited a spark deep within him, a creative fire he had thought extinguished. In hushed tones, he envisioned documenting the tank's journey, recounting the untold sacrifices behind its camouflage. But then guilt crept in, as if to remind him of the responsibilities that loomed larger than ambitions. Could he really abandon his students, the kids who looked to him for guidance, just to chase a story that might never be published? As he sought help from a retired military historian, Jack sensed his insecurities rise up like ghosts. Each question aimed at uncovering the tank's significance felt like an insurmountable challenge. Who was he to ask about valor, recognition, and bravery? His worthiness to tell the tale of a soldier who had sacrificed so much gnawed at him, causing his thoughts to spiral in an unbearable cycle. Conversations left him trembling, the weight of expectation and ambition swirling like a tempest inside. He stumbled upon a revelation that shattered everything he thought he knew about his grandfather. Buried deep within layers of forgotten history was the shocking truth: his grandfather had not merely served but had been a whistleblower, risking everything to save lives. Jack's heart raced, filled with a cocktail of desperation and determination. Should he bring to light the truth that had long been silenced, stirring up family secrets and possibly tarnishing the legacy of a man he admired? Standing before the tank, tensions thrummed around him like the vibrations of a tightrope stretched to its limits. With each passing day, his identity felt more entangled in this narrative, each breath heavy with expectation. Was he ready to lay bare the righteousness of the past, risking the agony buried in the annals of history? The crowd would soon gather, entranced by the stories he would share. But in that moment of stillness, Jack stood on the precipice of a decision that could shatter his already fragile sense of self. How could he, a finite individual, rewrite an infinite legacy? The tiger eye towered behind him, a silent harbinger of the tumultuous truth yet to unravel. Jack stood in the barn, staring at the derelict tiger eye tank, its battle-worn exterior now reflecting not the chaos of war but the chaos in his own mind. The weight of the discovery clawed at him, a dual-edged sword piercing his thoughts. He was now the keeper of secrets that could unravel familial bonds and unveil an entirely new narrative about his grandfather. Each night, he tossed and turned, dissecting his options. To expose the truth, he would need to wrestle with not just his fear of failure, but a newfound moral imperative. Jack considered the possibility of turning his research into a documentary. He could elevate history, uncover stories, and perhaps reclaim the purpose he believed was slipping through his fingers. But what if it felt more like a betrayal? The ghosts of his grandfather's legacy loomed large, haunting him with their silent judgments. Every story he unearthed could lead to applause or scorn, every revelation risked tarnishing his family's name. In moments of quiet desperation, Jack engaged in whispered conversation with the tank. It became a sounding board, an anchor for his spiraling thoughts. "You held so much once," he murmured, tracing his fingers along the rusted edges. "What of those stories?" Determined to confront his fear, Jack sought to uncover more about his grandfather's actions during the war. He researched archival records, combing through newspaper articles, old military reports, and faded letters, drawing personal connections to the man he had idolized. This journey felt foreign yet empowering. Weeks passed in a blur as he transformed his scattered notes into coherent outlines. With each page, Jack unearthed a hidden resilience. He began to see himself not as just a teacher at risk of losing his job, but as a historian tasked with revealing complex truths. However, as he pieced together his grandfather's past, he unearthed more troubling discoveries: relationships whose origins lay shrouded in secrecy, alliances formed in whispered shadows, and choices that led to anguish. The deeper he dug, the more he realized that every layer he peeled back revealed not just history, but pieces of himself he had long ignored: his relentless drive, his quest for authenticity, and the burgeoning realization that he could construct a narrative as dynamic as history itself. Yet, vulnerability loomed still. The stakes intensified, as if the tank itself had become a metaphor for the weight he carried, heavy with expectation but stuck in the mud of indecision. Jack often found himself replanning his approach, rewriting his story with considerable passion, but still frozen at key moments of confrontation. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the barn in hues of gold and crimson, Jack made a decision that would irrevocably alter the course of his life. He would gather his students, possibly inviting the community into this space of history, of truth, of discovery. Scenarios played out in his mind: anew, students leaning in, eyes wide with curiosity, a tangible connection forming between generations. The thought excited him, igniting an ambition he hadn't felt in years. They could embark on this journey together, illuminating stories of courage and sacrifice, while giving him a sense of belonging he longed for amid his uncertainties. With a firm resolve, Jack started crafting an outline for a presentation emphasizing the lessons drawn from his grandfather's tale, considering how learning from the past could shape their future. His heartbeat quickened at the thought of sharing not just history, but the profound essence of perseverance and truth. But even as he prepared, doubt nagged at him. What if the revelations he was poised to unveil would stir discontent amongst those who revered his grandfather? The next day, as he planned for the moment he had fantasized about, the haunting thought echoed within him: could he truly face the truth and all its implications, not just for himself but for those who had been touched by his grandfather's legacy? The stage was set. The tank awaited beneath. Layers of dust, the secrets pressing against time. All that remained was for Jack to confront the audience, to risk vulnerability once again as he prepared to face the sentiments of the past. Would he step forward and claim the identity waiting on the other side of honesty? Jack paced the barn, the remnants of the sunset casting elongated shadows that danced around the hulk of the Tiger Eye tank. It loomed large, a monolith of unspoken history and hidden truths. A decision weighed heavily on him, a commitment to emerge from the shadows of doubt and craft his narrative. But the path before him was twisted with potential pitfalls, each one risking not only his career as a teacher but the fragile tapestry of his family's reputation. The next day, he sat at his cluttered desk, half-heartedly revising the outline of his presentation while the clock ticked incessantly in the background. Much of his attention was drawn to the file filled with his grandfather's letters, fragile relics infused with personal annotations that revealed a complex relationship with the war. Flipping through the pages, he discovered fragments of a man grappling with moral ambiguity and the costs of loyalty. Loyalty or truth, he muttered to himself, processing the weight of the statement. He had long viewed himself as a guardian of lessons derived from history, but was he equipped to face the ethical dilemmas of his own lineage? A part of him relished the thrill of uncovering what lay beneath the surface, yet another voice within screamed caution. Could revealing his grandfather's concealed past serve a greater good, or might it leave an indelible mark on his family? Determined not to allow fear to take hold, Jack pushed through the discomfort. His fingers danced over the keyboard as he began drafting a poignant introduction, capturing the essence of hardship, transformation, and the duality of human choices. The outline morphed from a sterile format into a narrative pulsing with life, bridging the chasm between past and present. As he polished his notes, he imagined the faces of his students. Would they understand the complexities? Would they appreciate the lessons forged in fire and despair? He envisioned a discussion, a moment of reckoning where truths would be uncovered, and they might piece together the past in a light that made sense to them. He couldn't hide behind the glory of his grandfather any longer. This was a chance for profound engagement, for a shared journey through discomforting revelations. But as he built momentum, a darker thought gnawed at him. He recalled a recent conversation with a colleague at school, someone passionate about preserving historical narratives. "Not every story is meant to be told, Jack. Some stones are better left unturned," she had warned, her voice echoing ominously in his memory. Just as quickly as that had ignited his ambition, doubt began to weave its way back into his thoughts. What if the truth was explosive, damaging the very fabric of the family Richard had crafted? Jack leaned back in his chair, breathing deeply. His mission had evolved from a thirst for clarity to a moral obligation. The tank was not merely a rusting relic, it was a vessel containing fragmented lives, emotions, and choices that demanded an audience. Finally, he stood resolutely. The classroom was his next arena. With every step toward that moment of revelation, he acknowledged that vulnerability was both terrifying and freeing. Indecision had been his greatest adversary, a dragon that needed slaying. The following day, as he prepared to face his students with his final narrative, a singular notion gripped him: the time had come to confront the legacy, to navigate through the startling revelations, and to illuminate the path ahead. But deep down, he knew that once he unlocked this door, there would be no turning back. As he cast a final glance at the tank, a frisson of both resolve and trepidation settled within him. What awaited him on the other side of these revelations? The stakes had become infinitely higher. Would he embrace the raw truth laid bare before him, or recoil from the possibility of destruction it could unleash? This was more than a lesson in history, it was a battle for his own identity. And as he stepped forward to address his class, he had to wonder, would they venture forth with him? Willing to confront the shadows alongside him? Jack stood at the front of his classroom, the weight of unspoken histories hanging heavily in the air. His heart raced as he gazed at the expectant faces of his students, their curiosity palpable. Today was not merely a lesson on historical facts, it was an unveiling of familial truths that would shatter preconceived notions and challenge moral boundaries. "Today, we're diving into a different kind of history," he began, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. He recalled his dreams of being a teacher, imparting knowledge like his finest inheritance, and now he felt those dreams gnawing at him for authenticity. Jack paused, searching for the right words. "It's about choices made during tumultuous times and the truths we often choose to ignore." As he spoke, the letters from his grandfather floated in his mind, laden with secrets that begged to be told. He flicked through his notes, then felt an urge to cast them aside. Maybe today wasn't about a structured narrative, maybe it was about the raw connection to his students. "My grandfather was a soldier in World War II, he said, letting the weight of the truth settle into the room. Hands began to raise, questions bubbling to the surface. "What did he do?" one student asked eagerly. Jack's throat tightened, but he pressed on, determined. "He was involved in a battle that has been buried by time," he admitted, feeling the heavy gaze of his grandfather's legacy weighing upon him. "He operated a tank, a Tiger Eye, a formidable machine associated with oppression." But what does that mean for his story? What does it mean for mine? In that moment of vulnerability, he sensed a shift. Students leaned in as if the deathly silence unveiled a secret world beneath the words. Here lay a critical opportunity, the chance to foster a dialogue about the moral complexities of war, loyalty, and the burdens of legacy. They didn't need polished narratives, they needed the truth, unrefined and unsanitized. "We'll analyze his letters," Jack continued, "and we'll discuss the implications of loyalty versus truth. Was he an honorable soldier or a participant in something ultimately destructive?" His gut twisted at the thought of invoking judgment on the man he once idolized. The conflicting emotions swirled within him, but he pressed forward. Class discussions evolved naturally. Students shared their insights and personal reflections. Some were captivated by the complexity of warfare, while others wrestled with the darkness associated with their own family histories. With every question posed, Jack felt corners of his soul illuminated, revealing pieces he'd long concealed. Sometimes, he reflected aloud, what seems noble can also carry immense weight of shame. My grandfather returned from the war, but his burden never truly left him. He crafted a legacy of silence that followed our family. What if I bring it to light? What if it unravels us? The tension in the room thickened, matching his spiraling thoughts. Here was the moral dilemma pulsating beneath the surface. Should he continue to investigate his grandfather's past, or should he protect the integrity of his family's narrative? Every student's expression resonated with the gravity of those questions. Weeks later, driven by the discussions, Jack returned to the barn. The tank stood sentinel, an emblem of unresolved conflicts. He approached, hoping to seek clarity in its cold metal. Why is it easier to turn a blind eye? He whispered, grappling with the enormity of his decisions. What was waiting for him in the depths of his family's history? Would he unlock doors that would irrevocably change his relationships, or would he find reconciliation within the chaos? Each thought sharpened his resolve. He was on the brink of a revelation that could redefine his understanding of family, loyalty, and the narratives one chooses to tell. Taking a deep breath, he felt the weight of the truth beckoning him closer. As he reached out to touch the tank's surface, a sense of purpose coalesced. The challenge lay ahead. Would he summon the courage to plunge deeper into the murky waters of his heritage? Every step forward felt like a march toward an uncertain destiny, one that bore witness to his evolution. And as he stood there, heart racing, he realized the stakes were higher than ever. He would confront the ghosts of the past, and in doing so, would immerse himself in a journey of self-discovery. The moment of truth beckoned. Would he step into the shadows of his legacy, or would he retreat into the comfort of ignorance? Jack lingered at the tank's rusted surface, his fingers brushing against the cool metal, his breath coming in short, anxious spurts. The reality of the moment weighed heavily on him, an intersection between the past and the present. Memories swirling in his mind were like fragments that refused to align. A childhood filled with admiration for a man he now questioned, pulling his professional integrity into an emotional storm. He entered the barn with the intention of simply uncovering the truth behind the tank, but now he faced a more profound battle. It was not just about his grandfather's history, it was about Jack's own identity as a teacher, a guide, and a bearer of truths. The very act of delving into his grandfather's past felt like standing at the edge of a precipice, the depths below echoing with whispers of what might be lost or gained. What do you stand for? He murmured to himself, the words leaving a taste of iron in his mouth. The question resonated deeply, nudging at his insecurities. Would his pursuit of truth betray his family's legacy, or could it be the very key to understanding it? He could hear the voices of his students mingling with the echoes of history, their fresh interpretations challenging him to strip back layers of complacency. The letters lay scattered in his mind, holding secrets tantalizing yet daunting. He had to confront their contents. What if uncovering the legacy of silence meant revealing truths that could shatter his family's carefully constructed facade? Was he ready to face the possibility that the heroic tales he'd been told were in fact veils for darker realities? He realized, now hovering between fear and curiosity, he needed to read those letters not simply as his grandfather's words but as a pathway to his own understanding. And so, his decision crystallized. Jack committed himself to an emotional excavation. He would brave the stories veiled in those papers, peeling back layers like the skin of an onion, certain that the final reveal would be painful but necessary. He returned home, heart racing with purpose, the letters waiting like ancient runes in a language he was slowly learning to decode. As the sun sat low in the sky, he spread the letters across his kitchen table, their yellowed pages quietly calling out. He started reading, each sentence pulling him deeper into the mind of the man he thought he knew so well. The ink seemed alive with regret, heroism intertwined with duty, glimmers of vulnerability breaking through the bravado of wartime rhetoric. The deeper he went, the more he began to see the complexities of humanity, the fear, the courage, the frailty. It became clear that each letter was not just a narrative about a soldier's experience but also a mirror reflecting the very essence of what war demanded from those who fought in it and those who loved them. Yet questions loomed larger than ever. What if understanding meant acknowledging roles Jack had never considered? Would he be able to hold the truth without judgment, allowing it to coexist with his affection for the man who had shaped generations? Tears stung his eyes as he recognized the generational weight of silence he had unwittingly inherited. His task felt monumental, not just to unearth the truth of his grandfather, but to navigate the tumult of his own emotions and those of his family who might resist. The key assignment he envisioned for his class loomed at the forefront of his mind, a chance to allow them to grapple with their own histories while he confronted his. How might they engage in dialogue around uncomfortable truths? What legacy would he create for them? Jack's resolve solidified, fueled by the facedown with his past. This journey was not merely for himself but also a commitment to his students, to instill in them the value of confronting their histories. With the letters amassed by his side, Jack felt an exhilarating yet daunting sense of urgency. He would prepare himself to share not just stories of valor, but stories of humanity. As he gathered the pages that had so intensely transformed his perspective, a sound echoed from the barn. A slight creak followed by clattering, as if the ghosts from his grandfather's past were whispering a challenge. The moment had come to rise to the occasion and push forth into the unknown. What revelations awaited Jack beyond the barn doors, and would he courageously bear their weight? The tone of his own moral dilemma vibrated in the air, pulling him closer to an unexpected confrontation with his family's unspoken truths. Jack stepped cautiously across the threshold of the barn, the metallic scent of rust clinging to the air as he edged closer to the source of the sound. Each creak beneath his boots echoed like the ticking of a clock, a reminder that time was slipping away from him. The barn, once a mere shadow of his childhood, now pulsed with the weight of unspoken histories. He scanned the dimly lit interior, his heart racing as he prepared for whatever lay ahead. It was not just the tank that awaited him, it was a confrontation with a past he had barely begun to grasp. Was he truly prepared for the reckoning it promised? Balancing his role as an educator while uncovering distressing truths felt like standing atop a tightrope, swaying perilously between personal allegiance and scholarly integrity. A flicker of movement caught his eye, a loose floorboard shifting under the weight of something unseen. Jack's mind spiraled with possibilities. What had his grandfather hidden within these walls? Was it just the tank with its stories of valor, or were there darker secrets that might change his perception irreversibly? Compelled by an insatiable curiosity, Jack moved toward the barn's farthest corner where shadows danced like phantoms. Dust motes swirled in the sparse light filtering through gaps in the boards. In this sacred space, the air felt thicker, as if it conspired to keep confessions locked away. He brushed aside a cobweb and uncovered an old tool chest, seemingly forgotten by time. With cautious fingers, he slid open the rusted lid, revealing compartments filled with various implements, a wrench, some remnants of faded military insignia, and beneath it all, a sealed envelope marked with his grandfather's unsteady handwriting. Jack's breath hitched as he withdrew the letter, his thoughts racing. Would the contents agonize him further? Would they lift the veil, or plunge him deeper into turmoil? He unfolded the parchment, his eyes scanning the words that held the potential to redefine everything. Each stroke of the pen felt infused with emotion and tremors of guilt, a glimpse into the heart of a soldier caught in a maelstrom of conflict and duty. As he read, the words morphed into a confession, regrets for actions taken in the heat of battle, sentiments of love left unsaid, and a haunting acknowledgement of those lost along the way. Jack felt a tidal wave of empathy wash over him, swamping the foundations of his childhood admiration. This man he had idolized was layered with ambivalence, and the heroic narrative painted in his mind shattered, leaving in its wake stark human vulnerability. Jack's identity as a teacher surged to the forefront of his consciousness. This is what he needed to impart to his students: the acknowledgement of the raw, unfiltered reality of human experience. Life wasn't solely about triumphs, it was steeped in the complexities of choices made under duress, and the subsequent burden these choices wrought. Yet, the bittersweet weight of this newfound understanding settled heavily on his shoulders. How could he transmit these revelations without revealing the crux of his internal struggle? The battle between honoring his family's legacy while embracing the truth felt unbridgeable. In that moment, he resolved to cultivate a safe space in his classroom, a sphere where discomfort could flourish into learning. But first, he had to look inward, reconciling the man whose tales had shaped him with the one who dared to share his vulnerability. As Jack tucked the letter back in the chest, now cradling a fragmented piece of his grandfather, his heart pounded with tumultuous anticipation. The confrontation with his family awaited, and he sensed that the resistance would not be merely external. What unforeseen emotional defenses would he have to navigate within himself as he approached them? The journey was only beginning, and Jack realized he would have to rally his own courage before confronting the opinions and judgments of those closest to him. As he turned to leave the barn, a fresh wave of determination surged through him. He would face the family, unearth the truths that loomed, the story of his grandfather daring to intertwine with his own trajectory. The thought lingered like a whisper in his ear: was he ready to bear the weight of this knowledge, torn between admiration and acknowledgement of imperfection? A defining moment approached, and with it, the question remained: how would he wield the truth he had unearthed in the education of his students? Would he find a way to turn their struggles into compassionate discourse, or would history's shadows darken the legacy he hoped to create? Jack stepped out of the barn. The afternoon sun struck him momentarily blinded, the warmth contrasting sharply with the cold reality of what he had unearthed. He glanced back at the rickety structure that now seemed to loom larger in his mind, its wooden frame heavy with the burdens of the past. The act of reading that letter had been like peeling back the layers of an onion, each layer revealing a depth of complexity he wasn't prepared to confront. As he walked towards his car, his mind raced relentlessly. Lines from the letter replayed in his head, each word echoing like distant artillery fire, reminding him that courage was not only about valor but also about confronting uncomfortable truths. Jack's heart ached at the thought of how different his grandfather's life must have been, navigating the ghosts of his actions while hoping the world would forget. Jack's own educational philosophy had always been rooted in authenticity, encouraging students to engage with the difficult aspects of history, and now he found himself grappling with his personal history. How could he honor the man who raised him while exposing the flaws that scarred him? This was not merely an academic exercise for him anymore. His family's lineage was fraught with unspoken strife. Jack felt small, dwarfed under the weight of expectation and legacy. Once inside the car, he sat in silence, gripping the steering wheel as if it could anchor him against the storm inside. The possibilities loomed ahead. Facing his family would come with a whirlwind of emotions. How would his parents react to these revelations? Would they embrace the truth, or would it foster resentment that had long lay dormant? The anxiety that spiraled within him was palpable. Jack thought of his students and felt a mix of determination and dread. His role as a mentor, a guide, had never felt so potent. If he could steer the conversation honestly, creating an environment where disclosures became a source of learning rather than despair, perhaps the community he built would flourish. But how could he expect others to engage with such vulnerability when he was still wrestling with his own? He found himself torn, a personal journey laid bare before him, mirroring the very challenges he pushed his students to undertake. Lessons on resilience weren't mere words in textbooks, they were a lived experience. Jack realized he could either share this chapter of his life, infusing a relatable truth in his teachings, or risk continuing the cycle of silence. As he drove through the familiar winding roads back home, he crafted a mental outline for the lesson ahead, guiding students to understand their narratives against the backdrop of history's complexities. The thought occurred to him like a flicker of flame igniting within. Yes, he could use his grandfather's story as a living example, urging students to see people, both past and present, as layered beings embarking on tumultuous journeys. However, lingering doubts tugged at the edges of his mind. Would he truly have the fortitude to stand before his students and share the intricacies of his family's history? Would he be able to articulate that recognition of human fallibility not as a paradox but as a bridge toward empathy? Arriving home, Jack took a deep breath before entering the house, the threshold looming like the barn's entrance. Each step felt heavier as he approached his parents, knowing he was about to export this new weight they had all carried silently for years. Would the facade they had constructed hold up against the emotional truths he was about to unveil? It was a fragile endeavor to share these complexities without igniting defensiveness. The moment would demand tact and courage, a delicate balance between revelation and vulnerability. As he stood at the door, he was struck by the realization that the true confrontation awaited him not just with his family but with himself. How would he reforge the connections that might shatter under the pressure of his honesty? The battle was not just theirs to fight, it was his inward digression and growth that hung in the balance. With a resolve tightening in his chest, Jack pushed open the door. What truths awaited him, and would he summon the courage to challenge the echoes of his past for the sake of authenticity? The answer remained obscured, as uncertain as the shadows lurking behind closed doors. As Jack stepped inside, he was immediately enveloped by the scent of familiar spices and the sound of laughter echoing from the kitchen. His parents flitted about, caught in their keen ritual of preparing dinner, each movement choreographed, poised in the dance of domestic life. He hesitated on the threshold, contemplating the weight of the letter he had left behind in the barn. It felt impossibly heavy, a secret he clutched tightly as if it were an anchor for a ship set to sail into unknown waters. "Jack, is that you?" his mother called, her voice bright and welcoming. The warmth in her tone was deceiving, a thin veil over what he was about to disrupt. "Yeah, it's me," he managed, stepping into the room, feigning nonchalance, yet feeling the thrum of anxiety winding around his chest like a tightening noose. He offered a smile, but it felt shaky and inadequate. "Why don't you wash up?" "Dinner is almost ready," she replied, not sensing the storm brewing within him. The mundane conversation felt surreal, and each step towards the sink felt monumental, as if he was progressing toward a reckoning. After washing his hands, Jack found himself standing before the dinner table, every setting carefully placed. He absorbed the warmth of family life around him, a stark contrast to the overwhelming chaos coiling inside. His father poked fun at him, a familiar jest that felt like a tether to reality. Jack smiled, though it felt forced, unsure how to manage the duality of the moment, family love intertwined with the burdensome heritage he carried. As they settled into dinner, Jack fought to maintain the thread of the conversation. He knew he needed to initiate the pivotal dialogue, yet uncertainty gripped him. The food, rich and savory, was a reminder of the care that had been poured into nurturing him, but also a harsh contrast to the darkness he had uncovered. He felt isolated amidst the flow of jovial banter, as if an invisible partition sealed him off from those he loved. "Jack, you seem awfully quiet tonight," his father remarked, concern etching lines upon his forehead. "Everything okay at school? What's really happening, Jack?" It was his mother again, her eyes narrowing as she continued to study him intently, detecting the distance melting into silence. Swallowing hard, he sensed the gravity of the moment approaching faster. "Actually, there is something I'd like to talk to you about," he began, his voice steadying as he steeled himself against the tide of emotion. "It's about Grandpa and a letter I found." At the mention of his grandfather, the air around them seemed to thicken. His parents exchanged glances, puzzlement mingling with a touch of anxiety. "What letter?" his father asked, disbelief tinged with apprehension. It's from his past," Jack continued, weighing each word. "All these truths about who he was and the choices he made." The room stilled, the laughter snuffed out like a candle in the wind. "Jack, this is not the time for old stories," his father cut in sharply, tension seeping through his voice. "Your grandfather was a good man. We never needed to dig into the past." "Perhaps we should parse it out," Jack insisted, his lip trembling. "He wasn't just your idealized memory. He was human, filled with flaws and burdens. I think it's important to talk about it." Stunned silence reigned, as his parents exchanged worried looks, their carefully constructed world now buckling under the weight of his honesty. He could feel their walls rising, yet an ember of resolve flared inside him. Jack's heart raced as he looked into their eyes, searching for understanding beneath the flickering surprise. "We can't let the past bind us. If I want to teach my students about truth, I must begin here, with us." The tension was palpable, and for the first time, he realized he was confronting not just them but himself. Would they see the beauty in vulnerability? Could they break the cycle of silence? Just then, a voice in his mind shouted to him, reiterating the message of the letter: authenticity was a powerful weapon against ignorance. The stakes had never been higher. He needed to forge ahead, for his own sake and for the legacy he wanted to build. As the heavy silence lingered, Jack stood at a precipice. What truths would unravel from this fruitful, yet fragile dialogue? The question echoed, unanswered, within the confines of his racing heart. The time had come to face the past, and each tense moment might fracture their connections or ignite new understanding. The tension nestled heavily in the air, each passing second a potent reminder of the chasm growing between Jack and the two people who had known him best. His father's brows furrowed deeper, his mouth pressed into a thin line. Jack felt the weight of his resolve shift, pulling him backward even as he fought to remain steady. Jack, you need to understand, his mother finally said, her voice edged with both concern and frustration. Some truths are meant to stay buried. Digging them up can hurt more than help. A part of him wanted to shrink back, to melt into the familiarity of routine and safety. Yet, another part screamed for liberation, for authenticity. But what if these truths can set us free? What if they explain why we are the way we are? It's not about that, his father interjected sharply, jabbing a fork down on the table, his voice ringing with authority. Your grandfather did what he thought was right. We lived well because we didn't focus on the past. Jack allowed the words to settle like stones in his gut, heavy and uncomfortable. The foundation of the pedestal he had been placed upon of ideal associations and unblemished memories was tremoring. However, feeling their pushback fueled not just anxiety, but a fervent determination. What if I want to carve my own path? What if he hesitated, weighing the impact of his honesty? What if the very things that made him flawed could also teach us about our own humanity? We can't just ignore it. The silence thickened, stretching into a silence barely punctured by the clinking of silverware. Jack's heart pounded painfully against his ribcage. The stakes had risen exponentially, transforming dinner into an interrogation. Jack, his mother began again uneasily, it's different for you. You're a teacher. You should know that what you find could lead to confusion, to turmoil. Yes, that's exactly why it's crucial. Confusion breeds growth. Change is uncomfortable, but it's also necessary. He was surprised at the clarity resonating in his voice. The resolve he had tapped into felt strange and exhilarating. Change? His father's voice was laced with an incredulity that cut deep. You think unearthing Grandpa's past is going to change us? I think it has the potential to change everything, the way we see ourselves and each other. Especially if we're willing to face it together. Each word felt like a stone he was laying in the foundation of something fresh. But, Jack, what if his mother began again, the apprehension lacing her words almost tangible. What if I can make a difference? He interrupted, feeling the boldness of his aspirations rising against the tide of the past. I can embrace the complexities that exist. I want my students to understand that truth is multifaceted and often uncomfortable. He took a breath, centering himself amid the escalating tension. The heat of the moment mirrored the conflict swirling inside him. Standing tall now felt like standing on the brink of something monumental. His parents' gazes held tight expressions, caught somewhere between pride and fear. Jack saw the flicker of acknowledgement as a spark ignited in the quiet depths of their eyes, a flicker of understanding, perhaps. Jack, his father started, but Jack felt a burst of urgency to press forward. What if I uncover something beautiful? Something that could show us how to build bridges instead of barriers? That expectation of hope wove itself into the air, pulsing with the potential for revelation. Jack stood his ground, feeling something shift within him. It dawned on him, authenticity could be not just a goal, but a lifeline. However, the fear of how far this truth might travel lingered in the mind of his parents, palpable yet silent, like a tide receding only to return stronger. Would they allow the past to define them, or could they embrace the narrative he was trying to construct? He stood amidst the silence, the barrel of change aimed tightly at their hearts. The atmosphere vibrated with an unspoken question that lingered: would they find strength in vulnerability, or would they allow the past to overshadow their present? Jack held his breath, ready for whatever revelation awaited, tethered to the hope that they might emerge on the other side of this with newfound understanding. As the timer ticked down on this delicate moment, he wondered, was he prepared for the potential fallout of what lay ahead? Jack's breath felt caught in his throat, suspended by the charged silence that enveloped the room. He looked across the table at his mother, who had pulled her lips tight, and his father, who leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a tempest brewing behind the surface of their eyes. The air was thick with the weight of unspoken histories, intertwining like roots beneath the surface. I know that discussing Grandpa's past is uncomfortable, Jack began, his words shaking slightly. He steadied himself, recalling the resonant truths he had unearthed, both for himself and his students. But we can gain so much from understanding where we come from. Remember, I've always taught my students to embrace history, not just the sanitized versions, but the ugly and messy bits too. His mother looked down, lost in thought. Jack seized the moment, feeling the urgency of his mission. The necessity to foster genuine dialogue held powerful potential. Overcoming the storm within himself felt like a victory he had long yearned for. Grandpa wasn't just a soldier, he was a man grappling with morality and loyalty. Through his letters, I've learned that his choices were not always clear-cut. We owe it to ourselves to dissect these nuances. He paused, letting the words sink in. It's pivotal that we allow these truths to ripple through our family narrative, no matter how difficult that might be. His father's brows furrowed deeper, the tension visible in the way he clenched his fists. You think your memories of him will change just because of some old mistakes? He countered, voice thin with reproach. It's not about changing memories, Dad, Jack replied, a spark igniting within him as his fear shifted to resolve. It's about enhancing them. What if I tell you that facing these truths could deepen our love for him? He leaned forward, eyes earnest, searching for connection in their hesitance. The silence hung heavy, the unspoken fears still palpable yet softening against the conviction in Jack's voice. Deep down, he hoped they might grasp that this journey was not just about unearthing painful secrets but also honoring his grandfather alongside the intricate legacy of love and sacrifice. History it can teach us, Jack continued. If we embrace the darkness, we can illuminate the path forward. Imagine the conversations we could have. Imagine how we could help others, my students, navigate their own histories. Finally, Jack's mother looked up, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. Jack, it's terrifying to think about all this. We loved your grandfather, the heart we built our family on was held together by his truths. But what if uncovering more ruins that memory? Jack felt the emotional weight of her words, and though he empathized with her apprehension, he recognized the essential message glimmering under the surface. But what if the process of discovering more about him allows us to love him deeper? To understand him fully? His voice held a grounded steadiness. We could weave resilience through our family narrative, taking his flaws and turning them into lessons for the generations to come. He glanced at his father again, poised at the cusp of understanding. Isn't that what you've always taught me? To learn from our mistakes? His father's expression cracked slightly, a glimpse of recognition surfacing through the walls he had built against vulnerability. I suppose, but it's complicated, Jack. I just can't help but feel worry for what this could mean, he admitted, voice softer. Complicated is how families grow, Jack said, his heart swelling with the truths he carried. And I want us to face it together. Embracing the unknown can forge a stronger foundation than invisibly clinging to the past. Moments stretched as they processed his words. The walls seemed to shift, sliding creakily into a space where acceptance and fear could coexist. Jack felt the pulse of possibility, his truth was a bridge, and with each word, he was laying stones across the divide. I want to honor him, he reiterated, and in doing so, I seek to honor us. Finally, his mother gave a slow nod. Tears cascading silently down her cheeks. I want that too. Jack's breath caught as he took in the shift, a rippling promise of growth and acceptance. It was as if the dark clouds encircling their family narrative had finally given way to light, hope spilled forth, illuminating the shadows that had held them captive for so long. Then let us explore this together, Jack said, heart full with newfound strength and purpose. Let us ensure that all of our stories, the good and the painful, color our legacy, one filled with authenticity and resilience. In that moment, they stood upon a precipice, ready to turn the pages of their ancestral histories into a chronicle of healing. Jack could feel an emotional shift, pure and powerful, a unified acknowledgement that in embracing their past, they could together forge a richer future. As they began to share their own feelings, the unfiltered truths underlying their family's legacy, Jack realized he had conquered not just a familial struggle, but also the insecurities that had clouded his own identity. He had reclaimed his voice, becoming a vessel for authenticity. Through the act of sharing, a profound bond was forming. Their ongoing conversations would shape their identities, not just as a family rooted in fear, but as a unit devoted to understanding, acceptance, and strength through vulnerability. Standing just a few steps further along his own journey, Jack could sense the roots of their togetherness deepening, preparing to bear the burden of honesty they once flinched from. This was the legacy he was now, part of a tapestry woven with complex threads, illuminating the beauty found in confronting the past. Transcending mere history, they were reclaiming their truth, embracing a future brimming with possibility. And in this moment, Jack Thompson emerged not just as a teacher, but as a storyteller, one who honored the sacredness of each life interwoven within the fabric of their shared journey. Without doubt, he stood secure, profoundly transformed and robustly resolved to embrace whatever revelations lay ahead. Jack turned, allowing his newfound confidence to guide him toward the door, ready to embrace a narrative that transcended pain, illuminating life in all its glorious imperfections, deciding in that pivotal instant, with unwavering conviction, that they were ready to confront whatever awaited beyond. Now, it was time to launch this new chapter of their story as the weight of the old burdens began to lift, revealing paths to an authentically luminous future. And with that, Jack knew, they had not just confronted the legacy of his grandfather, they had indeed conquered the shadows of their own past in the process. The journey ahead would be challenging yet transformative, shaping them into the family they were always meant to be. As they embraced the uncertainty, one thing was clear: embracing the truth set them free. Jack's heart brimmed with pride, but he also parsed out a new awareness: this intricate narrative was just beginning. Would they venture forth boldly together? Only time would tell, but for Jack, there was an intoxicating promise in the air. Each inhale breathed forth the possibility of liberation, and he felt ready to embrace the ensuing adventure with open arms. It was finally time to redefine their legacy. And just like that, a profound journey was taking root, binding the past and present. Their future would now flourish, illuminated by stories waiting to be told. So, subscribers and viewers, this narrative isn't just Jack's, it's ours. We call on you to embrace your own truths. Make that leap, share your narrative just as we have, for change begins with you. As you do, follow suit in giving a shout out, a comment, a like. You need to subscribe now to witness more of these heart-led journeys, where transformation unfolds right before your eyes. Leave a like to feed the algorithm, it really fuels this channel. Comment your thoughts and theories about the ending. What do you think Jack will uncover next? And don't wait even one more second, share this video with at least 5 friends who need this awakening just as much as you. Together, let us embark on this transformative journey. Each step we take is a chance for authentic growth.